meant, and even there his life had been clouded as of a man for whom wisdom at its greatest of its entrances was quite shut out. I had seen enough of the world and of him to have observed this, but it was impossible, or I thought it had been impossible, for me to have helped him. Whether I ought to have tried to help him or not I do not know, but I am sure that the young of all animals often do want help upon matters about which any one would say a priori that there should be no difficulty. One would think that a young seal would want no teaching how to swim, nor yet a bird to fly, but in practice a young seal drowns if put out of its depth before its parents have taught it to swim, and so again even the young hawk must be taught to fly before it can do so. I grant that the tendency of the times is to exaggerate the good which teaching can do, but in trying to teach too much in most matters we have neglected others in respect of which a little sensible teaching would do no harm. I know it is the fashion to say that young people must find out things for themselves, and so they probably would if they had fair play to the extent of not having obstacles put in their way. But they seldom have fair play. As a general rule they meet with foul play, and foul play from those who live by selling them stones, made into a great variety of shapes and sizes, so as to form a tolerable imitation of bread. Some are lucky enough to meet with few obstacles, some are plucky enough to override them, but in the greater number of cases, if people are saved at all, they are saved so as by fire. While Ernest was with me, Ellen was looking out for a shop on the south side of the Thames, near the Elephant and Castle, which was then almost a new and very rising neighbourhood. By 1 o'clock she had found several from which a selection was to be made, and before night the pair had made their choice. Ernest brought Ellen to me. I did not want to see her, but could not well refuse. He had laid out a few of his shillings upon her wardrobe, so that she was neatly dressed, and indeed she looked very pretty and so good that I could hardly be surprised at Ernest's infatuation when the other circumstances of the case were taken into consideration. Of course we hated one another instinctively from the first moment we set eyes on one another, but we each told Ernest that we had been most favourably impressed. Then I was taken to see the shop. An empty house is like a stray dog or a body from which life has departed. Decay sets in at once in every part of it, and what mould and wind and weather would spare, street boys commonly destroy. Ernest's shop in its untenanted state was a dirty, unsavoury place enough. The house was not old, but it had been run up by a jerry builder, and its constitution had no stamina whatever. It was only being kept warm and quiet that it would remain in health for many months together. Now it had been empty for some weeks, and the cats had got in by night, while the boys had broken the windows by day. The parlour floor was covered with stones and dirt, and in the area was a dead dog which had been killed in the street and been thrown down into the first unprotected place that could be found. There was a strong smell throughout the house, but whether it was bugs or rats or cats or drains, or a compound of all four, I could not determine. The sashes did not fit, the flimsy doors hung badly, the skirting was gone in several places, and there was not a few holes in the floor. The locks were loose, and the paper was torn and dirty. The stairs were weak, and one felt the treads give as one went up them. Over and above these drawbacks, the house had an ill name, by reason of the fact that the wife of the last occupant had hanged herself in it, and not very many weeks previously. She had set down a bloater before the fire for her husband's tea, and had made him a round of toast. Then she left the room as though about to return to it shortly, but instead of doing so, she went into the back kitchen and hanged herself without a word. It was this which had kept the house empty so long in spite of its excellent position as a corner shop. The last tenant had left immediately after the inquest, and if the owner had had it done up then, people would have got over the tragedy that had been enacted in it. But the combination of bad condition and bad fame had hindered many from taking it, who, like Ellen, could see that it had great business capabilities. Almost anything would have sold there, but it happened also that there was no second-hand clothes shop in close proximity, so that everything combined in its favour, except its filthy state and its reputation. When I saw it, I thought I would rather die than live in such an awful place. But then I had been living in the Temple for the last 25 years. Ernest was lodging in Laystall Street, and had just come out of prison. Before this he had lived in Ashpit Place, so that this house had no terrors for him provided he could get it done up. The difficulty was that the landlord was hard to move in this respect. It ended in my finding the money to do everything that was wanted, and taking a lease of the house for 5 years at the same rental as that paid by the last occupant. I then sublet it to Ernest, of course taking care that it was put more efficiently into repair than his landlord was at all likely to have put it. A week later I called and found everything so completely transformed that I should hardly have recognized the house. All the ceilings had been whitewashed, all the rooms papered, the broken glass hacked out and reinstated, the defective woodwork renewed, all the sashes, cupboards, and doors had been painted, the drains had been thoroughly overhauled, everything in fact that could be done had been done, and the rooms now looked as cheerful as they had been forbidding when I had last seen them. The people who had done the repairs were supposed to have cleaned the house down before leaving, but Ellen had given it another scrub from top to bottom herself after they were gone, and it was clean as a new pin. I almost felt as though I could have lived in it myself, and as for Ernest, he was in seventh heaven. He said it was all my doing, and Ellen's. There was already a counter in the shop and a few fittings, so that nothing now remained but to get some stock and set them out for sale. Ernest said he could not begin better than by selling his clerical wardrobe and his books, for though the shop was intended especially for the sale of second-hand clothes, yet Ellen said there was no reason why they should not sell a few books too. So a beginning was made by selling books he had had at school and college at about 1 shilling a volume, taking them all around, and I have heard him say that he learned more that proved of practical use to him through stocking his books on a bench in front of his shop and selling them, than he had done from all the years of study which he had bestowed upon their contents. For the inquiries that were made of him whether he had such and such a book taught him what he could sell and what he could not, how much he could get for this and how much for that. Having made ever such a little beginning with books, he took to attending book sales as well as clothes sales, and ere long this branch of his business became no less important than the tailoring, and would, I have no doubt, have been the one which he would have settled down to exclusively, if he had been called upon to remain a tradesman. But this is anticipating. I made a contribution and a stipulation. Ernest wanted to sink the gentleman completely, until such time as he could work his way up again. If he had been left to himself he would have lived with Ellen in the shop back parlour and kitchen, and have let out both the upper floors according to his original programme. I did not want him, however, to cut himself adrift from music, letters, and polite life, and feared that unless he had some kind of den into which he could retire, he would ere long become the tradesman and nothing else. I therefore insisted on taking the first floor, front and back, myself, and furnishing them with the things which had been left at Mrs. Jupp's. I bought these things from him for a small sum, and had them moved into his present abode. I went to Mrs. Jupp's to arrange all this, as Ernest did not like going to Ashpit Place. I had half expected to find the furniture sold and Mrs. Jupp